Okay, I think we're ready to go now. So again, thanks for joining us this Thursday to talk about Awasi Patagonia. I know I'm super excited about this new property to have in Chile, and so is everyone else that I've spoken with in the industry. So the point of today is the property is still under construction. We're taking our first commercial guest as of November 15th of this year. So we still have some things we're working on right now as far as the complete list of excursions and the common area of the building, but today what I want to focus on, providing you the travel trade, is a better understanding of the location of Awasi Patagonia, the villa infrastructure there that we're providing for guests, and the unique service and sales points, which are being private excursions and a completely tailor-made experience in Torres del Paine. I'm probably going to do a second series of webinar later when we talk more about like astronomy and about particular excursions, but today is kind of an overview. And the way that I'd like to do my webinars is to keep it shorter in duration. These are great that we can get feedback from you from the travel trade about Awasi Patagonia, and also to ask the right questions. So I'm not going to do a traditional question and answer session just because I find it takes a lot of time and it leaves people sitting in here watching this when I could easily just answer all your questions afterwards. So during the webinar, if you have questions or comments or anything, go ahead and type those into the little control panel here on your right. You type in your question, your comments, whatever, and at the end of the webinar, I'm going to get a compiled list that the program sends me, and then I'm going to follow up with you about an hour to an hour and a half after the presentation, answering every single question, so you'll be able to see all the questions asked and all the detailed answers as well, and I've just found that's the most efficient way to doing it. So, Awasi Patagonia. First, if those aren't familiar, this is the second property by Awasi. Awasi is a Chilean company, and our first property was up in the Atacama Desert. Awasi up in San Pedro de Atacama Desert. This has been operating since about 2006, 2007. It really has become the preeminent lodge up in the Atacama for a few defining characteristics, that being it is the smallest luxury property there with only 8 rooms, and we're the only property in the region in the Atacama that provides private guide and a private vehicle for guests during the duration of their stay, so they can do excursions on their own schedule to choose the excursions they want rather than operating in a shared excursion format as the other properties do. This property, we were part of Virtuoso up in Atacama. We're not sure yet about membership consortia of Patagonia. Awasi Atacama is part of Relais Chateau. This also might be a fact for Patagonia. We're still considering that. And Awasi Atacama has won tons and tons of awards over the year, and most recently, the one we're most proud of, we were chosen last year by Andrew Harper organization. We were the #1 grand award winner of the year, the Hideaway of the Year by Andrew Harper. So the idea with Awasi Patagonia was to take the concept of Awasi and apply this to other destinations in South America. And the next, which what we're going to talk about today, is in Torres del Paine in Patagonia. And just quickly, I want to talk a bit about the concept of Awasi. The general manager, Matias de Cristobal, has it very clear as far as what Awasi's value proposition is for your travelers coming to South America. We build these uber luxury, customized, tailor-made lodges in some of the most spectacular areas of South America, and those need to have 2 components, a strong cultural and natural history component, which makes up half of the guest experiences. Where Awasi comes in is that this is a really nice way that I've heard Matthias put it, is saying that where Awasi is that if we look at the guest experiences as sitting on a table that Awasi provides, and that table has 3 legs. And those 3 legs are made up of our lodging, of our gastronomic offers, and our excursions for guests. And all 3 of those legs and all 3 of those service standards need to be equally strong. They need to be amazing. One can't be shorter than the other, or we end up with a wobbly table and thus a wobbly experience for the guest when they're coming to stay there with us in that area. And on top of that, we want to focus on the flexibility of doing everything in private for guests. We want an intimacy where we have very small properties rather than very large properties, and of course comfort, which goes across all boards of the lodging, astronomy, and the outings. So location. We are located Torres del Paine. We're not actually in the park. That's one question that many people ask, but I want to show you, if you can see my little laser pointer here. First, I'm going to talk about access points as far as how people get to Torres del Paine National Park. It sits right on the border between Chile and Argentina. Some of you know all of this, but I'm just going to go over it briefly for those that maybe don't, that aren't as familiar about how people get there. As you can see from the airports around us, there's daily flights to Punta Arenas, Chile, which is about a 4-hour drive from Punta Arenas Airport, or the port there, where people are also disembarking cruise ships, driving up to Awasi and Torres del Paine. People are arriving via that avenue from Punta Arenas. People are also coming from Argentina, from El Calafate and Los Glaciares National Park. From Calafate over, it's also about a 4-hour drive, and with involving crossing the border at Cerro Castillo. And then there's also flights twice a week by Sky Airlines into Puerto Natales. And Puerto Natales really is the gateway into Torres del Paine. From Puerto Natales to Awasi is an hour-and-a-half duration. From Awasi in the park out to over here, we'll switch over to this map, from where Awasi is over to the Argentine border at Cerro Castillo is just about a 40-minute drive, so we're very close to the border for those guests that are coming over from Calafate. I'm going to talk a bit about this more at the end in detail, because I know a lot of you are aware that the way that we're operating our transfers, our all-inclusive programs include the private excursions, the lodging, the meals, and transfers. We're going to be providing as our core services transfers are included in the rates from Puerto Natales and from the border at Cerro Castillo. And I'm going to talk more in detail about this at the end, but essentially because we're running a much smaller lodge with private guides, we would basically have to double our transport fleet in order to do 10-hour airport transfers to Punta Arenas. And we want to focus on flexibility for each customer, not just providing a one-size-fits-all solution. We don't want to do shared transfers for people, because that goes against the basis of what Awasi does. And we also don't want to have fixed transfer schedules. So I'll talk about this more near the end of it when we talk about rates. So going into location more, we're going to zoom in here a little bit and first start out with a map looking overview of Torres del Paine with some points of interest that I know most people are familiar with, maybe some of the other properties that they're sending guests to in the park. So as you can see here where Awasi is, we're just on the margins of the border of the actual national park boundary, and for very good reason. I'm going to talk about this in the next slide of why this location was chosen for Awasi. But as you can see here in relation to us, from where Awasi is, for us driving over to the base of the towers is about a 30-minute drive, or actually less, probably about 20 minutes to get here to the base where the hike for up to the towers starts. We're about 50 minutes getting over to the Lago Gray area and Glacier Gray, but basically to the two park entrances, which are at Puerto Lago Sarmiento and Lago Armaga Gate. Each of those are about a 20-minute drive from the Awasi property itself. So going on to the property, what Awasi was looking for about 6 years for the ideal property, for the ideal piece of land, and where to build the property. And what we were looking for was something different. We were looking for, one, we didn't want something that was on one of the main park roads where we would have buses coming through and tourists all the time. We really wanted people to have a sense of, the incredible isolation and wilderness, which is Torres del Paine and which is Patagonia. This park, Torres del Paine National Park, is obviously one of the most iconic national parks in South America. And one of the reasons that makes it so spectacular, it's so large, and the amount of visitors it still receives, even though it's very popular. They only get about 80,000 visitors a year. That was the statistics from last year. So to put that into perspective, that amount of visitors for one of the most iconic national parks in South America, in relation here in North America, Yosemite so Torres del Paine only receives 1/45 the amount of visitors that a park like Yosemite receives in a year. So we're looking for something remote, and right here what we're looking at, this white boundary, is a very large estancia. It's a sheep estancia called Tercera Barranca, and we managed to purchase a piece of land inside Estancia Tercera Barranca. Tercera Barranca is a huge, huge sheep farm that dates back to the 1800s, and it essentially is about 32,000 acres and covers more than 50 square miles of land. They were looking around for properties in the park or where to put Awasi, and we wanted something where guests could do excursions directly from our lodge itself. And one of the big problems in the park, obviously, is that this park is notorious for the intense winds that come through here. So we were looking for something protected. We were looking for something away from the main road so we'd have a sense of isolation and a sense of wilderness around it. And that's what we found on Tercera Barranca. So moving on, we're just going to zoom in here a little bit. Again, this white boundary are the boundaries of Tercera Barranca. Where these two blue roads are, these roads are basically roads that we had to build in across Tercera Barranca to access our property. So within Tercera Barranca's 32,000 acres, Awasi purchased this property that's outlined in green, and that is where basically the Awasi property is built, and it's built out on about 250 acres, or less than half a square mile of land. And then adjacent to that, this red area is the Awasi Private Reserve. And this is an agreement with the estancia that Awasi has exclusive rights to access this land that's never going to be developed or built on. We wanted to protect this portion of nature. I'm going to talk about more reasons why, and that particularly is because of the wildlife and the forest that exist on this property. So on top of where the lodge is built, on these 250 acres, we have an additional private reserve of 15,000 acres extending out from the property, which is exclusive to Awasi. So the private reserve, this is looking, we're looking south from the actual property, from the Awasi property. From the private reserve, we're looking south towards Lago Sarmiento. Our backside, looking the other direction, we'll be looking at the actual towers. This property is very unique. If you remember back from that satellite picture, one reason why is because there's very luxuriant native forest there. You don't get a lot of forest down in Torres del Paine because of the intense winds. When you do have large forests, native forests that are still intact, it's because they're very well protected from the wind. So we're backed up against a ridge, which protects us from the very intense north winds, and therefore on the lee side of this ridge we have this very luxuriant growth of nire and mangla trees in the area. And when they were looking around for this property, they were asking around, trying to find remote areas, and the one key piece was one of the gauchos on Tercera Barranca had said, up there on that ridge in that forest, I go kill probably about 5 pumas a year. They kill these pumas obviously because they eat the sheep. And right when we heard that, said, that's what we're looking for. And we found this beautiful, beautiful native forest, very, very rich in wildlife. I'm going to show you some more pictures of wildlife spotting up on the property later. But that was key for us, was finding this remote area that was untouched, full of native forest that really protected the wildlife and also was shielded from the wind, so we would have a setting where guests could actually go out of the buildings when they were not on excursions in the park and explore the private reserve. Sorry, one thing I forgot to say is with the so some people that might have come in here late, if you have questions during the webinar, I'm not going to do a live question and answer session, just so go ahead and enter your questions into the little chat pane during the presentation, and I'm going to answer them all in email afterwards. So up on the property, up in that forest here, this is the master plan of the property, the way it's laid out. Unlike other properties in Torres del Paine, what we have done is this is spread out across about a half square mile of land. We have our main lodge area here, which is the restaurant, the reception, the lounge area, the service areas, and then what you see here are 2 roads branching out from the main lodge, and these are our villas, our private villas. We have 12 villas, which I'll talk in more detail about next. So the main lodge is something that right now this is being finalized, so I don't have actual pictures of the main house, but just to show you the main area where guests arrive in the reception area, and our dining room and the bar and the living room and the lounge. This will be the common areas of the lodge. Also the service areas, something that we're doing differently here is, unlike in Atacama where our 8-room property, we have a very high staff to guest ratio. Up in Atacama we have, with only the 8 rooms, so maximum 16 guests, we have anywhere from between 50 to 65 staff working, and that's fine in Atacama because most of them live in the town of San Pedro. Here we didn't want, understanding that we're going to have an equal amount or even a larger staff of about 70 to 80 people to support this level of service that we're providing. The staff lodging is actually in the town of Cerro Castillo. It's not at the lodge because we having 80 people living in this would really kind of defeat the idea of this private reserve and the exclusivity for our guests. So the service areas are mainly going to be for the general manager, for the kitchen staff that need to be there full-time, but most of the extra staff are going to be based in Cerro Castillo, about 30 minutes away. So that picture that we saw at the master plan of the property, this is us looking at it actually in actuality, looking up at that rich nire forest and mangla forest, and you can see up here in the top, this is that main lodge building, which you can see is still a little bit under construction. It should be finished here in this month, but the lodges are finished, the villas. So we're looking at the lower road of the villas. You can see the space out between them, and these were space that you can't see one another. From when you're inside your villa, all you have are unobstructed views. So this is just a little bit of a view of the overview of the property and our views. So this is looking north, looking towards the towers. Absolutely phenomenal, phenomenal views. Since we're elevated up above this ridge, you have this panoramic view looking south towards Lago Sarmiento, and then looking north directly at the towers. You can see how close we are actually to the Paine Massif itself. And when this was built, I mean, obviously nowadays sustainable green construction and infrastructure is a very important aspect. And when this was built, because our whole idea was having this private reserve, which was full of which is really full of wildlife, you can lose that wildlife quickly when you're constructing a lodge, particularly through the excavation process when you need to pour foundations and build foundations. What we did here instead in order to protect the reserve was most of the villas were actually built and constructed in Punta Arenas and then were transferred into the property. And as you can see, these are elevated on stilts, and we did that so there would be a minimal amount of construction noise in the shortest amount of time period possible, so we could place the villas there in the private reserve sitting on stilts, so we didn't have to scar the landscape and also didn't have to scare away the wildlife through heavy excavation processes. These lodges are brand new. The way that they look on the outside right now is they contrast a lot, but that's actually any trees that needed to be felled during the property. That wood was used to layer the exterior of these lodges. So over time, this natural wood on the outside is going to weather and is going to blend in more with the landscape. And it goes into kind of Awasi's design detail is that we don't want our property to be contemporary. That's really going to contrast too much with the landscape. We want people to really feel, comfortable in their lodges, but feel like they're part of nature, and that it's not some huge monstrosity building and construction in the park that really contrasts with the reason why people are going there, and that's to experience the majesty of the park. So we're going to go in. I'm going to take you through one of the finished villas to show you the level of quality at this. We have 12 villas overall. We have 11 villas like this, which are our standard villas, and then we have also a master villa, which are 2 villas combined. So if families that want 2 rooms connected, we have that. So this is just a layout of one of the villas. You can see the entrance hall, which works as the mud room. When people come in off their excursions, can leave their boots as well, which is closed off so the service staff can come in and clean people's boots in the evenings as well. These villas, they are 860 square feet, each of the individual villas, so about double what anything else room size for other properties in Torres del Paine. And here's our master villa as well. There's one of these, which is a 2-bedroom villa that has the added addition of this indoor terrace, which is enclosed. So wonderful for families that are coming. And let's peek inside and have a look at one of the villas. So again, inside the villa, the same local wood, so it blends in with the landscape. This is the little living room area of the lodge with a wood-burning fireplace as well. You can see here from the bed looking out of the views. This is a cloudy day. The photographer was here during the winter time, but that's looking straight at the tower's view. And all these villas, they're going to have king-size beds, which can be converted into twins if needed. So it's just essentially when you request your reservation, you can request the bedding for that. And this is looking back from the living room through the villa, looking through the sleeping area and towards the bathroom of it. And again, another shot of one of the living rooms with a wood-burning stove. And in the back, what you see, that is actually a very large minibar. Down below are 2 refrigerators and the whole area of snack cupboards. Since the villas are set away from the main lodge area where people will go up and dine in the main lodge area, these are going to be very amplified minibars that are included in the rates. So when guests are at their lodge, if they need anything, it's going to be there for them, or they can just radio the main lodge and stuff will be brought to them via golf cart. As well with transportation, as you saw the layout of the property, depending upon the age of the visitors, mobility issues, those that want a bit more privacy will have lodges set further away from the main lodge building. Furthest away lodge would take you a maximum of maybe 4 minutes to walk to the main common areas. And then obviously people with more mobility issues will assign them villas that are closer to the main lodge building. But they're in contact via radio with the service staff at all times. If they need a ride up to the main lodge or back because it's raining or snowing, we're going to have 4x4 golf carts basically to shuttle people around the property. Here's a view of the soaking tub inside the bathroom, and another view of the interior of the bathroom just to give you an idea of the feelings of the villas here. One other thing to point out is that this year, since we're opening, we're taking our first guest in November. We have 12 villas, but for the first season entirely, we're only going to operate with 8 of the villas, and which is a really good thing and really reflects to show the quality that Awasi is committed to. Even though we could fill the 12 and sell the 12 the first year, we want to keep it just to 8. We're very used to running an 8-lodge operation up in Atacama, and also obviously in the first year with these villas, if we have problem with electricity of one of them, if we have problem with plumbing of one of them, we don't ever want to end up in a situation where our guest is having these inconveniences during the stay. So we're keeping the additional villas. We're only selling the first 8 for the first season and keeping the additional 4 villas as backup villas should we have a problem with any one of them, and also having some space as well for you in the travel trade if you can make it down to visit us this this upcoming Patagonia season, we'll have those extra villas for travel trade members coming on fam trips. So the exterior of the villas, this picture, the only thing that's not complete in this, you can see that tub, the hot tub, wood hot tub outside. There's going to be decking built off of each of these villas where the sunken in hot tub is going to be, and these are going to be wood-fired hot tubs. So while guests are out on excursion during the day, they can ask their guide, say, hey, I'd really like to have a soak this evening when I get back. So while the guests are out, the staff can go down, light the fire, start heating up the tub before the guests get back. So in the evening they can come out to their private tub, outdoors, under the southern sky and stars, and soak in the hot tub in the evening. So each of these will also, apart from the jacuzzi tub inside, will have their own wood-fired outdoor jacuzzi as well, which they can use every night they want. They can use one of the nights, whatever. They're just going to ask the staff. So again, when we're talking about this private reserve, remember that this property and these individual villas are surrounded by 15,000 acres of a private reserve. This is one of the villas. We're looking south towards Lago Sarmiento here. But the idea is that people can walk out of their villa. We're going to have a trail network throughout our private reserve. So guests as well, with their guide, can go out and explore the trail network should they not want to go into the park and do excursions. Touching on wildlife, when we talked about why Awasi chose this destination with this rich native forest, there is a phenomenal amount of wildlife in Torres del Paine, and a lot of it seeks shelter in these forests, which are protected from the wind. Torres del Paine is well known for the guanaco. This is a herd of guanaco. We have tons of guanaco on the property that are roaming through constantly. This one, I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with this animal, but this is, I think it's called the Patagonia hairy armadillo. These are often seen up in there. And also on our ridge, because the north wind is blowing over this ridge, it creates this beautiful ridge lift right over the ridge, and basically flowing over the property above us. We can see tons of condors up on that ridge flowing back and forth, so it's a wonderful spot for condor viewing on the property as well. These are Darwin rays as well below, which is a form of ostrich, which also inhabit this ridge area. And one of the most spectacular things is puma. I wasn't even aware of this initially, but the puma population in South America, this is about as far south as they migrate, down to this parallel where Torres del Paine is. And actually with wildlife biologists, they say one of the very best puma spotting areas in all of South America is the area in Torres del Paine, just north of Lago Sarmiento and around Lago de Magra, basically right where the Awasi Patagonia property is. And this is evidence of it. This was actually a photographer that was taking the interior shots of the villas, managed to capture a shot of one of the puma while on the property. He was only there for 3 days and managed to get this one shot of it. So very rich area actually of puma, which there's never been a case of these attacking people in the park. They're mainly nocturnal predators that head out, but they exist, and we're in one of the prime areas. So this might be a thing in the future that guests will be actually able to spot pumas when they're out on excursions with their guides at the lodge. So going on to excursions, apart from you saw the beautiful villas there and the layout of the property, the defining characteristic of Awasi, which separates it from the other luxury properties in the park, is that we do everything in private. They have their private villa, and then each of the villas we have 12 full-time naturalist guides, and we'll have 12 4x4 vehicles available for the guests. So when guests are staying with us, they get to choose their excursions. They have their own private guide. They have their own private vehicles, so they can head out on excursions on their own time frame. If they're really early risers, they can do that. If they want to head out later in the day, it's up to them. We don't do shared excursions at this property. It's all private. Private guide, private vehicle for each of the 12 villas. Our excursion menu, our complete excursion menu, is still being worked on at the moment by Jimena Dip, who's our excursion guide for Awasi and also for Patagonia. Obviously, most of you are familiar with selling Torres del Paine. All the excursions that you're used to having guests do within the park are going to be available to them, such as the hike up to the base of the towers, heading over to Lago Grey and Glacier Grey area. All the excursions in the park will be available for guests during their stay, and they can work this out before they arrive or when they're there during the property, speaking with their guide about what excursions they want to do while they're staying with us. But again, that's replicating what everyone else does is the excursions in the park. I want to take it back to a really defining characteristic of Awasi is the luxury that they have the luxury of leaving their private villa, going to explore the park and with their private guide on their own private excursions, and then the luxury of coming back onto a private reserve, which is only available for them, and doing some excursions that are unique to Awasi. And just to give you a little teaser, I can't really tell you all the private excursions, but we have some really amazing excursions that we're developing directly on our private reserve. I'm not sure how many of you ever heard of this lady, Florence Dixie, but Florence Dixie was back in the 1800s. She's actually kind of she was born in Scotland, was a royal lady. You should Wikipedia her after this presentation, but very high society, English lady, very highly politically connected, part of high society. Her family had royal connections as well, and just this type of woman, I'm sure we can all relate with, got fed up with that. It wasn't who she was, and she left and went and traveled throughout Patagonia over the years 1878 and 1879. Came into Punta Arenas on a steamer and headed out this big expedition to explore Patagonia. She wrote a book called Across Patagonia, and you can still find it on Amazon and stuff, and we hope to maybe be sending this to guests and, of course, have it in each of the lodges so people can read it while they're there. But an incredible story of this woman who was, used to every luxury back in Europe that went on this crazy expedition in the Patagonia over 140 years ago. And she kept an incredible journal and did these charcoal drawings while they were there. And this is an example showing where she chose her base camp when she was exploring the park was what is now Awasi Patagonia's private reserve. So this is a sketch from her journal and from her book Across Patagonia that she wrote in 1878, and this is the view today from the villas at Awasi Patagonia. So this is an example of one of the excursions that's going to be available for guests of Awasi Patagonia. It's going to be the Florence Dixie excursion. While they're at the property, they'll head off with their guide. They'll talk a bit about who she was. They'll maybe read some of the writings of her journal, and they'll hike out actually to the spot, to the base camp that she used, looking at these drawings that she had while she was staying on the property 140 years ago, and there's even still some artifacts left over from her expedition on our land. So again, this just shows where we're not just replicating the excursions that people are used to selling in the park. We're coming up with a completely new experience for guests visiting Torres del Paine that really connect them with the cultural natural history of it. We're going to have more excursions like this available for guests of Awasi. We found some petroglyphs on the backside of the ridge as well, which we're developing an excursion of how to access that, to visit these petroglyphs, and also visit with some local gauchos, to do an asado as well out. So really cool excursions, and again, we're probably going to do a follow-up webinar to talk more in depth about the different excursion options. So to sum it up, I just want to talk a little bit about the rates, and since we are opening and taking our first guest November 15th, I know everyone in the industry is always worried when a new property opens up, is it going to be ready? Because we're so used to maybe new properties never opening at the time they say they're going to, and it being pushed back and putting us in a difficult situation with our customers. Awasi, since it's been worked on, we've been right now we're about 2.5 months ahead of schedule for all of the planned portions of building. So we're actually going to be having people come starting in October. And that's just going to be friends and family of Awasi that are going to be staying there from all of October and the first half of November. And that's just going to be our shakedown period to make sure that everything's operating perfectly before we will take your valued customers as commercial guests at their lodge. For the first year, in the entire first season, so from November 2013 until May 2014, we're doing a soft opening rate, which is a 30% discount from what our rates will be starting in the 2014-2015 season. So you can see it just looking and eyeballing these rates right now. I'm going to send these to you afterwards and follow up. I'm going to send you a marketing link that has rates, that has a fact sheet, that has images, that has all the maps that I've shown you in this presentation. But it's really good if you want to compare these rates with some of the other luxury properties in the park. You'll see that, particularly for the soft opening, we're actually at or even cheaper than many of the other properties. But again, with the added advantage that you're having private, you're going to have these large 860 square foot villas. You're having a private guide, private excursions for all your guests. And then lastly, people ask about, since we're coming in with a completely new concept in Torres del Paine and for services here, we are doing our transfers a bit different. So within those rates, which I just showed you, which are the per person rates, the transfer service that is included in the per person rates is including private transfers where they're going to meet their Awasi guide and their Awasi vehicle is going to be in Puerto Natales, an 1.5-hour drive from Awasi, or we're going to meet them at Cerro Castillo. And those are included in the rates. People aren't paying anything additional on those rates for it. However, guests that are flying into Punta Arenas or disembarking ships there, or guests that are coming from El Calafate, Argentina, there is going to be a supplement cost for a private transfer from those areas. So we're going to have a full-time customer service representative based in Punta Arenas to meet people disembarking the ships like Cruceros Australis and also people arriving at the airport. They're going to arrive, be met by name by someone from Awasi, and then we're providing an additional cost that's obviously operated by a transport company in Punta Arenas private vehicle transfers from Punta Arenas to Puerto Natales, where they'll meet their Awasi guide. And as you can see, the rates here for 2 people, this is not per person, this is for the service. This is a net cost that we're providing you. Private transfer from Punta Arenas to Puerto Natales is $200 up to 2 people, and $270 for up to 4 people. If guests are leaving Awasi and headed towards Calafate and don't want to transfer vehicles over to an Argentine vehicle at the border, that transfer is $380 for up to 2 people. And I know it always causes a stir when people do something different, not what everyone else is doing, but you need to understand Awasi Patagonia, we're providing a completely different service. With our private guide and private vehicles, ideally, if we could send that guide, the private guide and the vehicle all the way down to Punta Arenas to pick up every guest, we would. But you have to consider this is a 10-hour round trip. And if we were to do that, we would essentially need to double our private guides. We would need to double our vehicles and run an entire separate transport company to provide that level of service. And it would be extremely expensive for us to do that. Therefore, we see that Puerto Natales and the border are choke points, which everyone's coming through. They're an hour and a half from the property. It's where we can have a guide that drops people off in the morning and then brings them in, picks them up in the afternoon and they're coming in. It's going to provide the most flexible, tailor-made, and private, basically, transfer option that we can think of doing this. We do have people that are arriving by private jet in Puerto Natales as well. So those guests that are flying into Puerto Natales, either on the Sky Airways flight, they do have guests that are staying at a property in Puerto Natales at the Singular as well. They're not going to be paying any additional transport costs, but if they are coming from Punta Arenas and you want the private service, this is the small nominal net cost additional for that service. And so this just allows us, again, to tailor-make the program for people. We also have rates. If you have guests that want a helicopter transfer in, we can provide a net cost for a helicopter transfer from Punta Arenas to Puerto Natales as well, which is an option. So again, just allowing you to further tailor-make your client's program. And also we got a lot of feedback from people in the travel industry saying that they always ran into difficulties, particularly selling profitably properties in Chile because of the all-inclusive nature of it. This is going to allow you another level that, since those very long transfers are included, again, it's a way you can be good depending upon how you want to do that. If you want to do that through Awasi or through another service provider, provide helicopter transfers, another way for you to further customize the experience for each guest and kind of blur that all-inclusive price, which is published on websites or properties such as this. So I'm sure people have a lot of questions about this, which we're happy to answer. And again, I'm not going to do a traditional question and answer session. That's the summary of this webinar, so I'm going to leave this running for the next 5 minutes or so. Any questions you can think of, please enter them in the chat pane, and we'll get back to you shortly. We'll get back to everyone with a complete list of the questions that were asked and answers, and I'm going to send everyone in follow-up a copy of this presentation. We'll send you a copy of all the images for the property, a fact sheet, maps, rates, etc. And again, we welcome your questions, comments, and feedback about what's been presented so far. And please stay tuned for part 2 when we're going to go into more about the excursions and the food services. So again, thanks for joining us, and we'll be in touch.